It was 5:47 a.m. on a Thursday when my phone buzzed with a Slack notification I hadn't asked for and didn't want. I was still in my pajamas, standing at the kitchen counter waiting for the coffee to finish, and the notification read, "New process rollout, effective Monday. All vendor coordination to route through the new regional hub. Details to follow. No meeting invite. No heads up. No, hey, you manage 17 of those vendors, want to weigh in?" Just a blue bubble on a cracked phone screen, and the sound of my coffee maker sputtering into a mug I'd had since 2017, that said, "But first, coffee," and letters that were mostly rubbed off by now. I stood there and read it twice. Then I poured my coffee, added exactly 1 sugar, and sat down at the kitchen table where I'd been running half of our company's government infrastructure contracts from a laptop and a legal pad for the past 6 years. I was the quiet one. I always had been. I wasn't the person who sent announcement emails or put my name at the top of decks I didn't build. I was the person who made sure the decks had real numbers in them. I was the person the vendors called when something broke at 11 p.m. on a Friday before a federal audit. I kept the thing running the way a good engine does, without anyone noticing unless it stopped. And now, apparently, someone had decided to reroute the whole engine through a hub that didn't exist yet, effective Monday, without telling the person who actually ran it. I closed Slack and opened my project tracking spreadsheet instead. I had 43 active vendor relationships, 9 federal contracts in various stages of compliance review, and a quarterly performance report due in 11 days. My team was 3 people, 2 analysts and a coordinator, and we had, by my last count, a perfect on-time delivery record for 4 consecutive quarters. I was very good at my job, and someone had just decided that didn't matter. His name was Kyle. That's what I'll call him, because that's his name, and there's no flattering way to describe what he did that would require a pseudonym. He came in as the new deputy director of operations about 4 months before everything fell apart. Mid-30s, fast talker, the kind of guy who had opinions about standing desks and subscribed to 3 different leadership podcasts he'd quote in meetings like scripture. He had an MBA from a school he mentioned in his email signature. He wore the same rotation of blazers in slightly different shades of grey, and he smiled in a way that made you feel like you were being evaluated while he did it. His father-in-law was on the board. Everyone knew it. No one said it. The first time I met him, he shook my hand and said, "You must be the one keeping the vendors in line." He said it like a joke. I smiled because I was at work, and that's what you do. By week 3, he was CCing me on decisions already made about my own contracts. By week 6, he'd renamed my workflow system something called the Dynamic Delivery Framework and sent a company-wide email about it without mentioning that a real person had built it over 4 years of trial and error and late nights. By month 3, I was getting calendar invites for meetings I used to run, except now I was listed as an optional attendee. I documented everything. That's the thing people don't understand about quiet people. We're not passive, we're patient, we notice, we write it down. I had a folder on my desktop called Operational Reference, and inside it was a running log, time-stamped, of every process change made without proper review, every vendor flag raised and ignored, and one very specific email thread about a document most people in that building had never read closely enough. Our master contract with the federal agency we served, the big one, the one that made up roughly $11.2 million of our annual revenue, had been negotiated during a particularly complicated period 3 years earlier. I had been part of the original negotiation team. I was 29 at the time, the youngest person at the table, and I had spent 6 weeks combing through every line of that document with our legal team and the agency's contracting officer, a meticulous woman who did not believe in ambiguity. She had insisted on something unusual. She wanted the continuity of a specific named point of contact embedded directly into the contract language. Not a title. Not a department. A name. My name. Our general counsel at the time had raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to tie it to an individual? People leave." She looked at him steadily and said, "That's exactly why I want it in writing." So it went in, page 31, section 8, clause C. It wasn't buried, it wasn't fine print. It was right there in plain language. The continuity of the named contract liaison, my name, my title, was a material condition of contract maintenance. If my role was substantively altered or eliminated without the agency's written consent, the agency reserved the right to trigger a full contract review with a 30-day exit window, penalty-free. Not fired. Not quit. Substantively altered or eliminated. At the time, I'd signed the document and moved on. I had work to do. Contracts don't negotiate themselves. 3 years later, I opened that document again on a Tuesday night after Kyle sent an org chart to the leadership team showing my position reporting into a role that didn't have clearance to touch federal contracts. My role had been quietly redrawn without my knowledge, without legal review, and without the agency's consent. I read Clause C 3 times. Then I saved a copy to my personal encrypted drive, printed one, put it in a manila envelope in my desk drawer, and went to bed. I did not sleep particularly well, but not because I was scared, because I was thinking. The thing about leverage is that it only works if you're willing to use it, and I had spent 6 years being the kind of person who kept her head down and her work clean and hoped that was enough. I had watched Kyle waltz in with his framework rebrands and his LinkedIn buzzwords and his father-in-law's phone number, and I had smiled and documented and waited. I was done waiting. But I wasn't angry, not the way people assume. Anger makes you sloppy. I wasn't sloppy. I was precise. 2 weeks after the org chart went out, Kyle called a full departmental town hall. Mandatory attendance, camera on. He'd rented out the big conference room and set up a live stream for the remote staff, which included me that day, because I was working from home following a vendor site visit the day before. The agenda said, Operational Realignment Update. I had not been asked to contribute to it. I logged in at 10,058 for an 11 a.m. start, set my coffee to my left, and opened my notes document in the background. He opened with a slide that had a photograph of a bridge on it. He liked bridge metaphors. Something about connecting silences and spanning distances. I had stopped listening to the setup by his second week. Today we're formalizing the handoff of our federal liaison portfolio to our new centralized hub model, he said. He clicked through to a slide that showed an org chart, a new one, cleaner than the last, with my name simply absent. Not reorganized. Absent, and then he said, we want to thank our outgoing federal coordinator for her service as we transition this critical function to a more scalable structure. Outgoing. He said it like I'd already left, like it was done, like he'd announced a weather change and expected everyone to carry an umbrella. I was still on the call. My camera was on. I was sitting right there in the gallery view, 11:03 a.m., drinking my coffee. And he had just called me outgoing to the entire department without telling me I was going anywhere. I want you to understand something about that moment. I did not panic. I did not cry. I felt something drop very cleanly into place, the way a key slides into a lock you've been carrying around for months without knowing what door it opened. I unmuted myself. Quick clarification, I said. The room, virtual and physical, went still. He blinked at my square on the screen. Sorry? Just a point of clarification on the federal portfolio transition, I said, keeping my voice exactly the same temperature as it always was. Has the agency been notified of this restructuring? There was a pause. The kind that tells you everything. We're handling the communication in phases, he said. Okay, I said, and has legal reviewed the transition against the master contract terms? Specifically, Section 8. Another pause. Longer. We're in the process of. I'm just asking, I said pleasantly, because Section 8, Clause C contains specific language about named liaison continuity that may be relevant to that timeline. I'd want to make sure we're not inadvertently triggering a contract review window. I watched his face on my screen. He smiled the way people smile when they don't know what else to do. Thanks for flagging that, he said. We can take this offline. Of course, I said, and I muted myself. The meeting ended 12 minutes later, which was about 15 minutes earlier than scheduled. My Slack started lighting up before I'd even closed the browser tab. Two of my analysts, my coordinator, a director from a completely different department who I'd worked with on the cross-agency project 2 years ago. One message just said, "Is Section 8 what I think it is?" I didn't respond to any of them. I opened my email and sent one message to our general counsel. Subject line, contractual review request. Federal Master Agreement, Section 8. Body, 3 sentences. No commentary, just a request for a call and a reminder that the document was in the shared legal repository, original executed version, uploaded and time-stamped. Then I closed my laptop and took a walk. Here is what I knew that Kyle did not. He had never read the original contract. I know this because the version in the general company shared drive was a summarized brief prepared 18 months ago for a leadership onboarding packet. It didn't include the annexes. It didn't include Section 8 in full. It included a one-line summary that said continuity provisions apply per standard federal terms, which sounds routine because someone who didn't negotiate the original had written it and had not understood what we agreed to. I had uploaded the full original to the legal repository 3 weeks earlier after the org chart email, without fanfare. Just a file drop. Time-stamped. Available to anyone with repository access. I hadn't sent an alert. I hadn't flagged it. I just made sure it was there. I came back from my walk, made a sandwich, and opened my laptop to 17 new notifications. The general counsel had already responded. "Can we talk at 3? I wrote back, "I'm available." At 3:07 p.m., she called me directly. Her voice was very measured, which I had learned meant she was either extremely calm or extremely not calm, and doing a good job of hiding it. "I pulled the original," she said. "I know," I said. "Section 8, Clause C it's pretty explicit." "Yes," I said. A pause. "Kyle's restructuring would constitute a substantive elimination of your named role." "That's my read," I said. "But you're the attorney." She was quiet for a moment. "Did you flag this before the town hall?" "I flagged the org chart change in writing to my direct manager 3 weeks ago," I said. "I have the email chain." "I did. I'd kept everything." She exhaled slowly. "Okay, I need to make some calls." She made her calls. I ate my sandwich and finished a compliance report that was due Friday. The next 36 hours were, I don't have a clean word for it, productive in a certain grim way, but not for me. For everyone else. Legal pulled Kyle into a meeting that afternoon. I was not there, but I heard from 2 separate people that he'd spent 20 minutes insisting the clause was legacy language that nobody enforces and that he'd been planning to get a contract amendment anyway. The general counsel had apparently looked at him for a long moment and said, "An amendment requires the agency's consent. Have you spoken to the agency?" He had not spoken to the agency. The agency, as it turned out, had not been formally notified of any of this. What they had noticed was that my name had stopped appearing on status reports over the past 6 weeks, and that their last 3 outreach emails to my address had been responded to by someone in the Mu Hub team who didn't know the history of their account and had once referred to their primary compliance officer as the guy in DC, which was both incorrect and deeply unhelpful. I learned this from a call I got the morning after the town hall from the agency's contracting officer herself, the same woman who had insisted on Clause C 3 years earlier. She called my cell, not the office line. "I'm going to ask you something directly," she said, "and I'd appreciate a direct answer." "Of course," I said. "Is your role being eliminated?" I took a breath. "My role has been substantially restructured without my knowledge or the agency's consent in a manner that I believe triggers Section 8, Clause C. Silence on her end. "Then, I see." She was not a person who needed things explained twice. That was one of the things I had always respected about her. "I'll need to formally notify our legal team," she said. "You understand?" "I understand completely," I said. The formal notice arrived at our company's legal department the following business day. It invoked Clause C, requested written confirmation of my employment status and role scope within 10 business days, and noted that absent a satisfactory response, the agency would begin its 30-day exit review, $11.2 million in annual revenue. 30 days to fix it or lose it. I want to be honest about how I felt in that moment, because I think people expect a story like this to be about triumph, and it is, eventually. But first it was about something harder to name. I had built something real. 6 years of vendor relationships and compliance systems and 5 a.m. crisis calls and a reputation with a federal agency that trusted me enough to put my name in a legal document, and it had taken one person, 4 months, and a town hall announcement to try to erase it. The thing that surprised me was not the anger. I processed the anger in pieces over months, late at night, during long drives, in the shower. What surprised me was the clarity. I knew exactly what came next. And I was ready. Our company's CEO called me directly the afternoon. The agency notice arrived. He was a practical man, not warm exactly, but fair. And he had enough operational experience to understand in roughly 90 seconds what had happened and why it was serious. "Walk me through Section 8, he said. I walked him through it. And legal is confirmed on the interpretation. "The General Counsel confirmed it yesterday," I said. A pause. "What do you need from us?" I had thought about this question carefully. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation. I didn't want Kyle publicly humiliated in front of the department, even though some small part of me wouldn't have minded. What I wanted was what I had always wanted, to do the job I was actually good at, with the resources to do it properly, and without someone rebranding my work every 3 months and CCing me on my own decisions. "I need my role restored to its original scope," I said. "I need to be the point of contact of record for the agency, formally. And I need the restructuring that was implemented without legal review to be walked back." "That's it? That's it," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "You're not asking for anything about Kyle." "That's not my job," I said. "It's yours." There was a long pause. Then he said, "Give me until tomorrow morning." I said okay and went back to work. Kyle was placed on administrative leave 2 days later, pending an internal review of his handling of the federal contract transition. The announcement was brief and bloodless, the kind that corporate sends out when they want everyone to understand what happened without actually saying it. Kyle will be stepping back to allow for a thorough review of recent operational decisions. The key word was stepping, present tense. Nobody believed it. His Slack status went offline and stayed there. His office plants, 3 of them, little succulents in matching terracotta pots, were still sitting on his windowsill for 2 weeks before facilities quietly removed them. I was formally reinstated as the agency's named liaison the following Monday. The CEO sent the notification to the agency directly, countersigned by legal, with a written confirmation that my role scope had been restored per the original contract terms. The contracting officer responded within 4 hours. She didn't say much. Just, "Thank you for the clarification. We'll withdraw the review notice. Please have your team send over the Q3 compliance status by end of week. Back to business." Just like that. My team lead knocked on my office doorframe that afternoon. She was one of the 3 people who'd messaged me the day of the town hall, and just stood there for a second. "Are we good?" she asked. "We're good," I said. "Q3 report needs to go out Friday." She nodded and left. That was it. No party. No announcement. No moment where someone handed me a trophy and said, "We're sorry we let this happen." Just a return to the work that had always been there, waiting, because the work doesn't care about org charts or framework rebrands or town halls with bridge photographs. I stayed late that Friday to finish the compliance report. The office was quiet. The city outside my window was doing its usual thing, sirens and headlights and the particular hum of a place that never fully stops. I thought about the contracting officer. How she'd insisted 3 years ago on putting my name in that document when everyone else thought it was overkill. She'd understood something I hadn't fully articulated to myself yet, that institutions are made of people, and when you find a person you can count on, you write it down. I thought about Kyle, wherever he was, probably spinning some version of this into a learning experience for his next LinkedIn post. Some people are like that. They move through organizations like weather. They blow things apart and then they're gone, and the people on the ground are left to figure out which trees are still standing. I was still standing. I packed up my laptop, turned off the office light, and drove home. I made dinner. I watched something forgettable on TV. I went to bed at a reasonable hour for the first time in 2 weeks. The next morning, I was back at my kitchen table at 5:47 a.m., coffee in my butt-first mug, laptop open, phone face up in case a vendor needed me. A notification came in. Slack. Routine status update from one of my analysts. I read it, replied with 2 sentences, and got to work. That's usually how it goes when you're the person who actually keeps the thing running. Nobody gives you a parade. The machine just starts back up, and you make sure it stays that way. A few months later, someone from a different agency reached out through a mutual professional contact. They'd heard, through the quiet, efficient grapevine of federal contracting circles, that I was the person who understood both the compliance side and the vendor management side without needing them explained separately. They wanted to know if I'd be available for a consulting engagement. I was. I took the meeting, mic'd what I heard, and started building something new alongside the existing work. My own client, my own terms. A contract I negotiated myself, start to finish, with no one CCing me on my own decisions. I thought about adding a clause, something specific, something with my name in it. I added it, not because I'm precious about recognition, because I learned something in that conference room 3 years ago when a careful woman looked at our general counsel and said, "If she leaves, we leave." I learned that the best protection isn't volume or visibility or a title that impresses people at dinner parties. It's being the person they can't afford to lose, and then making sure someone put that in writing. I'm not angry about what happened. I spent a long time thinking I should be, that maybe I owed myself a bigger reaction to the months of being sidelined and rebranded and treated like a legacy system, waiting to be decommissioned by someone who hadn't been there long enough to understand what he was touching. But the truth is, he didn't win anything and I didn't lose anything. He walked into something he didn't build and couldn't read, and tried to renovate it without a permit, and the walls came down on him. I just made sure I wasn't standing underneath them when they did. Stick around, you patient, brilliant people. There's always another story. And if you've ever been the one quietly holding something together while someone else got the title, this one was for you. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. And honestly, not much. Not because I handled everything perfectly. I didn't. There were months where I told myself that keeping my head down was wisdom, when really it was just exhaustion, wearing a quieter mask. There were weeks I let things slide that I should have documented sooner. Meetings I let Kyle run that I should have flagged to legal earlier. Patience and passivity can look identical from the outside, and I wasn't always sure which one I was practicing. But here's what I've come to understand about the whole thing, sitting with it now, from enough distance to see it clearly. The outcome was never really about the moment I unmuted. It was about every decision that came before it. I spent 6 years doing the work the right way. I built relationships carefully. I read contracts the whole way through, including the annexes, including page 31. I documented things not because I was scheming, but because documentation is what competent people do. It's how you respect the work enough to protect it. When the time came where all of that mattered, it mattered because it was real. You can't manufacture that. You can't reverse engineer 6 years of credibility in a crisis meeting. Kyle couldn't have done what I did in that town hall, not because he wasn't smart enough, but because he hadn't done the work. And that's not an insult. It's just a fact about how trust accumulates. It builds slowly, in small transactions across years. The contracting officer knew my name because I had earned that. She'd put it in a federal document because she'd watched me operate long enough to believe it was worth the ink. No title, no org chart reassignment, no town hall announcement could touch that. What Kyle misunderstood, what people like him almost always misunderstand, is that power in a functional organization isn't about who has the bigger title, or the louder voice, or the father-in-law on the board. It's about who the system actually depends on. And systems are honest in a way that people often aren't. They don't care about your MBA or your blazer rotation. They care about whether the work gets done and whether the person doing it understands it well enough to keep it from breaking. He broke something he didn't understand. And then he was surprised by the consequences. I'm not telling you this to be harsh about him. I'm telling you this because I think it matters, especially if you're someone who has ever been the quiet one, the reliable one, the person who handles things without making noise about it. It can feel, sometimes, like that kind of work goes unnoticed. Like the people who shout about synergy and present at town halls are the ones who actually get counted. Sometimes they do. For a while. But there's a particular kind of stability that comes from building things that actually work. From knowing your contracts. From writing things down. From being the person that the careful, serious people, the Tanyas of the world, decide to trust enough to put in writing. That doesn't expire when someone reassigns your title. It doesn't disappear when you get called outgoing by someone who's been there 4 months. It's yours. It lives in the work. I went back to my desk after all of it settled, and I finished the Q3 report that was due on Friday. Because that was the job. That had always been the job. And I was still very good at it. Stick around, you steady, underestimated people. Every story worth telling starts with someone who just kept showing up.